while two-handed rods can be cast overhead, they far excel when being cast with spey casting and roll cast techniques. Now, a spey cast is simply a change of direction cast to allow you to pull back in a straight line and deliver a roll cast. It's very space efficient, time efficient, and is the perfect way to handle these bigger flies and heavier heads. Now let's start with a couple of easy techniques. I generally start teaching people to cast overhead, simply so they can feel that rod load. It also allows them to slow things down and also make sure they realise the importance of the bottom hand. Notice how it's my bottom hand making the cast rather than the top hand. My top hand stays pretty much in position where that bottom hand rotates back and forward. Keep that in mind for later. Now let's talk about the roll cast. There are three key components to your roll cast. There is the belly, there is the anchor, and there is the 180-degree straight line roll. The belly, or D-loop, simply refers to the line when you're at your top setup position between the rod tip and the anchor. From a side-on position, it resembles a large capital D or a sail on a yacht. Your anchor is simply that line that is touching the water between that point there and the end of your leader. The 180-degree rule is what makes this all happen. You should draw your rod back in the exact same line that you wish to send it out in. When you're in your firing position, your rod tip, your D-loop, and your anchor point should aim 180 degrees straight to your target. So now we understand the mechanics of the roll cast, let's go to the roll cast itself. When the line is straight and down in front of you, you're simply going to raise that rod tip nice and smoothly, keeping the tip in the water to your firing position. My firing position includes my arm at around about a right angle, my bottom hand ahead of my top hand, the rod tip tilted to the rear vertical, and a touch out to the side. Keeping the rod tip tilted to the side means that I'm not going to hook myself as that line comes up and delivers. All I'm going to do is smoothly drop the rod, pause a second for it to settle, deliver it forward. Now notice how the bottom hand is the hand that delivers the cast. The top hand stays in a relatively loose position from where it starts. Draw back, bottom hand. Draw back, bottom hand. I'm drawing the line back in an exact straight line towards where I wish to deliver it. Drawing it back and tucking that bottom hand up into my elbow to keep the rod tip tracking straight. That is your roll cast. Now the key thing with the roll cast is you're drawing the rod tip back in the same path that you wish to send it out in. And because rivers flow, that's not always possible. Sometimes you're standing there wishing to cast in this direction when your line starts off facing downstream. And this is where we introduce the spey casts. Now a spey cast is purely a change of direction cast to bring the line into alignment, to pull it back and send it forward. Now let's show you a couple of these casts. All right, now bear in mind here, I'm left-handed, so for your right-handers, a lot of these instructions will be back to front, but I have a cure for that. Now let's talk about the river flowing from left to right. When we begin with the line on a downstream dangle off our off shoulder, we need to get that line back upstream of us so we can deliver it to our roll cast. And this is where the circle spey comes in handy. Now there are a few things I like about teaching the circle spey to beginners. It's a very easy cast to master. It develops low line speed, so it eliminates a lot of the kicking associated with snap tees and higher line speed casts. And it's also a great cast for digging heavy flies and heavy sink tips out of the water. Now let's begin. With your line on the downstream dangle, your rod tip's going to be across your body. And the point your rod tip starts is where your rod tip is going to finish. Remember that. My first move, and the first and most important move of any spey cast, is the lift. It's a smooth, powerless lift to the vertical from this position. Raise it to there. And now I'm going to sweep the rod around and down in an upstream direction. Almost for my left hand, drawing a reverse capital D, and for right-handers, you'll be drawing a capital D. It's like this. That's all we're going to do for now. A couple of things you're going to notice. I did not use any power. I lifted the rod to there, I smoothly rotated it wide and around down here, and my only acceleration is in that final downstream and across phase. Next thing you know is my arms and hands stay close into my body. If my arms and hands are out wide, I blow the cast out and it's not going to anchor. So now we have that line upstream of us. My rod tip is finished in that same position. It means I can now lift a couple of feet and swing my rod around and up into my roll cast firing position. Think around, lift, 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 stop. I now have my D loop formed and I'm ready to fire. Let's have another look at this cast and completion. The lift, the placement, the sweep, the delivery. It's as simple as that. That is the circle spey. Now, from the other side of the river, the line is now in a downstream dangle off my casting shoulder. Now I can't just pick that line up like this and send it out there because I'm breaking the 180-degree rule. My cast will lose power, it'll lose its accuracy, and will lose its efficiency. So I need the double spey. Now, first and foremost, as with any spey cast, we lift the rod, freeing that head from the water. Once that head's free from the water, we own that sink tip. We can move it with ease. Secondly, I sweep that rod tip above me and place that line down upstream of me. I'm now in a position midway through my head. Next thing I do is sweep that rod around and up into my D loop. Now I'm ready to make my cast. Let's put that all together. Next thing to consider is your running line management. Now we don't just cast with a set amount of line, we shoot line out for distance. First thing to remember is your overhang, the amount of line between the rod tip and the end of your sink tip. That should be about 1 to 2 feet for most people. Next thing is the line we've stripped off our reel. If it's gathered at our feet in short casts and in soft currents, we're pretty much good to go after just making sure it's not snagged and it's ready to shoot. Lift it up, stop the rod, shoot our line. Now at the end of the cast, we need to retrieve that line and gather it in an organised fashion. Now if we just strip that line in and let it fall to our feet, that's okay in softer water or if we're on shorter casts. With longer casts or where there are a lot of snags or in faster flows, we need to coil that line to ensure it's tangle free and ready to throw out again. The easiest way to do this is to gather it in decreasing coils. Think 5 strips, pinch the line. Let's throw 4 strips or 3 strips, pinch the line. Let's do 2 strips, pinch the line. I now have 3 coils of line there in a nice tidy pull at my feet. I'm ready to make my cast and let that line shoot out again, tangle free. That's how easy it is to manage your running line. Okay, now we know how to get our fly out there. This is how we fish it. The first is to consider the angle on which you cast. Now, our whole objective is get our fly deep, and we can do that 2 ways. 1, use a super heavy sink tip. 2, consider our angles and mends so we can use an easier to cast, lighter tip, but get it deeper. Now if I cast directly across the stream, I have a lot of currents directly across stream pulling on that line. It's going to drag my fly line around and it's going to keep my tip from sinking. I'm going to need a heavier tip to get down. Or if I change that angle and pick a target in a downstream direction, there is less cross-stream currents affecting my flies and it's going to swing a slower, deeper swing. Let's show this. I've made my cast across stream. This is where I can mend or not mend, and we'll deal with that shortly. But notice my line is swinging around in a very, very slow manner, not affected by the myriad of currents if I had have cast directly across stream from me. However, if you want a shallow, faster swing, you may wish to change that angle and cast closer to the 90 degrees. But for getting deep and winter fly fishing, I'm generally going to pick a downstream angle, 45 degrees or less. Now here's 3 mends to help make your life easier. The first is our standard fly fishing mend, where we make our cast, Then we lift the line from the water and place it either to the left or the right accordingly. Remember, this is a powerless repositioning move. All we're doing is removing the rear of the line and placing it where we need it to be. The second is a pullback mend. We make our cast in a downstream angle, and once that line touches the water, we raise the rod upwards and backwards and then dump it back down again, removing tension from the line and allowing our sink tip to do its thing unhindered by a tight line from the rod. The third mend we made was an aerial mend, just like a reach mend we use with our single hand rods. As we stop the rod into the cast and the line starts to shoot, we follow through with our rod tip either out to our left or our right, placing the line in the air and allowing it to land on the water ready to fish. One thing to remember with mends is get them in early. If your fly and tip is already sunk to a decent enough depth and then you agitate that, you lift the rod and lift it towards the surface, you've ruined your progress. So once your line lands, before the line sticks itself to the surface, lift it, replace it, and make that mend. Now finally, on each of those mends you've just seen, you'll notice that once the line hits the water, I walk downstream a few paces, further removing tension from the line and giving my sink tip that little extra help to get a little deeper. Now the key to remember when you're swinging flies on your two-hander is not to use a overhead dry fly hook set. That's simply not going to work. So when a fish takes your fly, what should you do? My best advice to most people is nothing. Continue your swing, wait until you feel the weight. The fish will often grab the fly as it follows it in, nip, 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 and eventually engulf it. They'll hook themselves. Remembering, between your trigger finger and the fly, your line is under tension, and that's often enough to penetrate the fish's mouth. Next thing we can do, if you're on one of those days where you get a lot of grabby takes or snap-offs on light tippets, is to carry a loop of line and slip it on the strike. Let's show you how we do this. As the fly is swinging, I have that couple of feet of line beneath me. I'm swinging in, swinging in, swinging in. A fish grabs, I release that loop and pull my rod tip out into an outwards position to cushion the strike and to set that hook. What that does is it places my rod in a better position to absorb the strike, to pull the fly into the fish's mouth, and also gives the fish a few inches of line to take that fly in, especially if they're tail nipping or grabbing, such as in low, clear water conditions. And finally, when playing a fish on a longer rod, on a double hander, do not play it with the rod held high. You'll find that with a longer rod, there is far too much leverage, and most of the time you'll be playing them off the rod tip, and there's not a lot of power in the rod tip. Instead, keep your rod wide, keep your rod low, and bring that butt section into play. For more information, feel free to check out the Manic Tackle Project Facebook page or my Fly Fishing with Chris Dore and Friends Facebook page, and feel free to touch base. Get into your Manic retailer and get yourself sorted out with great advice and great equipment, and we'll see you on the river. Enjoy.